Hi, this is Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz. I'm here with a guest. Usually I say I'm here with an old friend. In this case, I'm here with a person I've always wanted to be friends with, and never had the opportunity. So I'm looking forward to this. This is Ron Torosian. I've had several interviews with, I've read several of his articles, but never had the opportunity to interview him. He's one of the people that if you sit there and try to explain who he is and what he's done, it'll go on for quite some time. He's described himself as an entrepreneur, author, and activist. He founded one of America's biggest independently owned PR firms. Since October 7th, he's been instrumental in the resurgence of Betar. Betar is a Zionist movement founded by Zev Jabotinsky. For those who aren't familiar with Jabotinsky he lived from 1880 to 1940. He was a Russian-born. He founded the revisionist Zionist movement and the Jewish Self-Defense Organization. He did not believe that Jews should take anything sitting down. He felt we very strongly that Jews should be active and we should protect ourselves and do the mitzvah of conquering the land of Israel. That's and Ron is following in his footsteps. Um, he was the first, Jabotinsky was the first Jewish leader to call on Jews to arm themselves and reestablish the Jewish state. This was before the Holocaust. So if people had actually listened to Jabotinsky, we'd be in a very different place today. So Ron joined Betar, Jabotinsky's movement, at the age of 13. He led the movement for many years as a youth. He also served as national president of Betar. Today, he serves as the vice chair of Betar Worldwide. And he divides his time between Tel Aviv and Manhattan. When I want to describe Ron, I say he was right wing Zionist before it was cool. So Ron, it's very nice to meet you. Did I introduce you
What
okay?
a what a pleasant and a fun introduction. It's so nice to hear how you speak, and it's so nice to be speaking to you. And you guys do important work, so look forward to getting to know you.
Thank you. May you be blessed for saying that. But I have to tell you something. You're doing something which I absolutely cannot do. You're in America, at least part time, and you're trying to get the American Jews to wake up. Um, what's that been like since October 7th? What did you see on October 7th, and what did you see for American Jews?
So I divide my time between Israel and Manhattan, half and half or so. Um, the first, I would tell you from October 7th for the first 3 or 4 months, I first one of my, the proudest thing I am perhaps is an Israeli. Okay, so the first 3 4 months I was really focused in Israel on Israel. I would tell you, yes, working in public relations at that point, if you asked me October 7th, I would have said, wow, PR, wow, PR, wow, PR. And I was very engaged at the highest levels of the Israeli government in terms of public relations, media perception, things like that. I worked at the time, I don't know if it's popular to say it when you describe me as a right-wing Zionist, but I was one of the first to establish the English language Foreign Media Bureau actually at the Hostage Center in Hostage Square in Tel Aviv before it became, really what it is today. But, at the time in October, it was chaos, as you know. And there was, in the state of Israel, a general sense of chaos. I would tell you, I came back to the States around January, February of 2024. And I, like so many others, couldn't believe what was happening on campuses throughout the world. But when I looked at it, I have to tell you, I didn't just say, oh my goodness, look at what they're doing. The first thing that came to my mind, I remember, was, oh my goodness, look at what we are doing. I couldn't process how young Jews were permitting these modern day Nazis to do what they do without any challenge at all. For me, perhaps that was really the hardest thing for me to see. Was really watching, and it still is, frankly. It's not just, where are the police and where are the authorities? Where the hell are the Jews? Is the question, that I think, struck me and struck me. In my homes, in both of my homes in Israel and in Manhattan, And in every office I've ever had, I've had a picture of Jabotinsky front and center on the wall. My bookshelves are filled with, Jabotinsky and Gerard Frank and Peter Bergson and all of these, mystical names that those of us on the revisionist right know. And so the Betar movement had always played a very formidable, role in my life, including, owning a public relations agency. One of the first things that, Jabotinsky often spoke about, many things before their time. Many of us like to think of him as a prophet, but one of the many things Jabotinsky spoke about before his time was the power of a publicist, was the power of the spoken word, that a word also is a deed. And so I and a group of others decided to restart Betar Worldwide, where we focus and today have about 35 chapters all over the world. And thank God, we've put new life into a breathing, running 102-year-old organization.
So, you've mentioned that it's very much concerns you the reaction of U.S. Jews. What do you think? I'm sitting here in Israel, so I have a kind of a distant perspective of what I think was happening in America since October 7th. How would you describe the reaction of U.S. Jews, and what do you think their reaction should be?
So I want to frame it by saying, I work with diaspora Jewry. I wouldn't just say American Jewry. Our focus for me and for our movement is not just on America, it's on Jews of the diaspora. Okay. So what do we think is the reaction of, liberal Jews, of American Jews, of diaspora Jews? The easiest answer I'll give you is, Israelis and anybody, Zionist, I think, will say on October 7th, there are a lot of people to blame. Okay. There are a lot of people that, whether it's the army, whether it's the government, whether it's the Shabak, whoever it might be, October 7th, we screwed up. Our nation, our people screwed up in a big way October 7th. October the 8th, I would tell you that the entire organized Jewish world completely failed us. All of those who spoke to us about whether it's, interfaith dialogue, whether it is, community affairs, any of these things, they completely failed us because we saw the world explode and we saw the lack of response that stood up. What do we think? It's about, what do we think the reaction should be of Jews? Jews today must stand up for themselves. Jews today must stand up and fight back. Jews today must stand up and be organized and kind of, there's many different things we can talk about. But I would tell you that in the diaspora, one of the biggest, losses in this war for us is the word Zionism. Zionism has really become a bad word for frankly many in the world. I would tell you that I don't think that even, if I had to say today, and I spoke to a very high level, the highest levels of Israeli government officials a few days ago, and he said to me, and I believe him, that perhaps 30% of the world Jews are truly with us, are truly Zionists. And I think that that's a number that's probably true. And I think, in the diaspora and in Israel, we are troubled with many, many issues. I'll tell you that, I go back and forth every month, every 6 weeks, back and forth. And among the most striking things for me is that Israelis, we as Israelis deal with our Meshuggah every single day that we have to deal with, from the army to the Houthis to the economy to the Dati or the no Dati, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Israelis really have very little perception of what is really happening in the Galut. And in the Galut, even connected Zionists, even what I'll call ultra Zionists, really have no clue of what's really happening in the state of Israel. I think, it's the first time perhaps in history, in the modern day history, that there's no question diaspora Jews need Israel much more than Israel needs the diaspora Jews, in my opinion. I think that that's a big sea change.
Oh, yeah.
There is no question at all that diaspora Jews need Israel more than Israel needs diaspora Jews. But we still see a tremendous amount of passivity. I would tell you today, in city centers throughout the world, from Melbourne, Australia, to London, to Manhattan, to Los Angeles, to Toronto, today, a major rally is being held for Palestine, for Hamas, in the center of the city. They will have thousands of people, and I'm telling you that factually. Today, we are organizing demonstrations in California, Melbourne, London, New York City, and Toronto. That's five off the top of my head that today are happening. We will have maybe 30, 50 people. They will have thousands with their faces covered, with weapons, and local governments in each of those municipalities is very much against us. We always regularly have Jews getting arrested. Why do Jews get arrested? Because they show up to demonstrations. First of all, I think, among the major changes that I think our community in the diaspora has to understand is that the police force today are not with us. I think it's very important to say it, that the law enforcement authorities in the diaspora, in major cities, in major states, New York, California, the UK, Australia, they're not with us.
They arrest people for Islamophobia on the internet, on social media. It's they're I don't know if they're scared, which is certainly not what a policeman should be, or if they actually do ideologically side with the left wing and their strange alliance with Islam.
I think it's probably both. I think that you have a mixture of, when you look at the police, okay, you have to ask yourself, and we ask ourselves as people in the streets, as people in the courts, as people confronting this, who's ultimately in charge, okay? So ultimately, the boss of a police chief is a, local mayor, local governor, things like that. I think throughout the world where you have, Democrat or liberal-minded leaders who are, by the way, anti-Israel, who are, by
Absolutely,
the way,
sure.
BB's the world's problem is what they're telling us, right? It's only about, and so those people, I think, are telling police, for example, in New York City, they're telling police just keep the peace between the two. The easiest way, one of the easier ways to do that is to remove a bunch of rowdy Jews who don't listen to the rules. And by the way, I've been arrested for standing on the street and yelling, for standing on the street and screaming, which these days you are not permitted to do in many municipalities if you're a Zionist, if you're a Jew, because they remove you, okay? And then there's no riot, and then they don't have to protect you. That's constantly what they'll say to our people. One of our people got arrested the other day in Toronto simply for walking in a big demonstration of jihadis. And, the reality is I think it's a mixture of, you will also see the Muslim/Palestinian force in the police forces grow. There are major towns and major cities throughout the world, from Amsterdam to Bergenfeld, New Jersey, where you have Palestinian police chiefs. So
Yeah,
how would one expect
with Palestinian flag patches? That was,
and so that's who you're calling for help.
I wish Bibi was as right wing and as extremist as they think he is. I want to point out you're a big fan of Zev Jabotinsky. He was calling for Jews to defend themselves way before the Holocaust. And I remember I grew up in America. I came here at the age of 30 in 1991. And when we were learning about the Holocaust, it was almost like, I was very like, oh gosh, it's a horrible thing. But you never really believed it could happen. But what I've seen in the last year and a half is something I never expected to see, especially in America. And so last week, I mean, it's amazing that I think that the American Jews, and my impression from here is that they're way too complacent. There have been two lethal synagogue shootings. There's been a ridiculous rise in anti-Semitic acts, and last week we saw two young people murdered on the street, not even for being Jewish, but for being Zionists. So do you think we're past the tipping point?
I do think we're past the tipping point. I think that when we talk about the greatness of Jabotinsky, okay, he traveled throughout Europe and the world before the Holocaust, and he said, Jews, liquidate the diaspora before the diaspora will liquidate you. And
Ooh.
he said, liquidate, there is a great fire burning. Liquidate the diaspora before the diaspora liquidates you, number one. And number two, of course, was his theme, which is our theme as well. Both these themes is Jews fight back. I absolutely believe in many places throughout the world, let's go beyond the tipping point of anti-Semitism, because we should talk about anti-Semitism, but there's more to it than this. So let's take a few cities: New York, Toronto, London, Los Angeles, Melbourne. Okay, let's take those
Oh
five
my
cities.
gosh, yeah.
Let's take those five cities I'm actively involved with. Okay. You have a very lax justice system, which means you can be arrested again and again and again, and you have very little consequences. Number one. Number two is you have thousands of armed, dangerous foreigners, Middle Easterners on your streets with their faces covered. Okay.
They've
So
clearly
therefore,
demonstrated. They've clearly demonstrated they have no problem resorting to violence,
and the police know it as well. The
and the
police know it
police
as
know,
well.
and they
So
don't
you
act on it.
So you take those themes and you say to yourself, let's go beyond that. Who will our children, and I say our children collectively, who will our children marry in places like this? Assuming also you're not yet Orthodox like myself. I'm a student of Rav Kook, but not yet Orthodox is how I like to describe it. So those of us who aren't yet Orthodox, who do our children marry in places in those five cities, for example? Let's pretend that you don't have a anti-Semitic problem, and you will, because today Jews largely live in ghettos. That is really the reality of how Jews live today.
Again,
Jews live
again,
today.
we've gone back to that.
We've gone back to that. So Jews live today in fancy ghettos called Bell Harbor and called Beverly Hills and called Golders Green, and called Thornhill in Toronto. And so those are fancy ghettos, but ultimately nobody's coming to help you at your school when you're attacked. Nobody's coming to help you at the streets when you're attacked. I this year, Betar, for the first year this year in many years, marched in the Israel Day Parade, which is, the largest annual gathering in North America of diaspora Jews. One of the things that struck us completely was that nobody was allowed to have a legal weapon at that gathering, even if you had a legal permit for a weapon, which is difficult enough to get in a blue state. You were not allowed to bring it to the parade. So what happened at the parade was it was 4 blocks away. You get in, and it is you're caged in so that they can't get to you, protected by a non-Jewish police force. Nothing about that felt like freedom. And yeah, sadly, I think we are very much in the place of in a place of no return for many of these places. And I also say it, even with obviously a much friendlier administration that running the United States than there would have been had we had, of course, Miss Kamala Harris be the president. Can one
Oh my
think about what
gosh.
it would have? That's right. Oh my gosh, is what you say. But I'll say to you, in these cities that I mentioned, okay, Melbourne, London, Toronto, Manhattan, Los Angeles, local justice is broken. Local elected officials are many of them pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas, anti-Zionist. How do you solve that, A? And beyond that, on a longer-term basis, why do you solve it? In other words, Jewish life in these cities is very expensive, is very difficult. I think it's going to be a long road back. And one of the things I say to everybody, and I'll ask you, is who is a diaspora Jewish leader that you admire? Who is a diaspora Jewish hero? Can you even name one? Who's living?
No. If they were the Rebbe, he's the
So,
the
most of us
That's
don't
about
believe
it.
the Rebbe is alive, right?
Okay.
So I would say to you, yes, of course, Chabad, for example, Chabad rabbis all over the world are wonderful, great communal leaders. The chief rabbi of South Africa, I believe is a strong communal leader. Ben Shapiro. So they exist, okay? But surely we don't have many Jewish leaders today that are even saying what needs to be said. Leave doing what needs to be done. You talk about what needs to happen in encampments. We've stopped many, many, many encampments. Now we stopped them. First of all, one of the first things we tell everybody is, first of all, we're settlers. We're Zionists. We're settlers. So if you're setting up an encampment, we're coming to sleep among you. You want to
Good.
have
Whoa.
Also,
Oh, you're my
they
man.
like to hold Gaza education seminars. We will gladly come and educate you about Gaza education seminars. We come with educators, many of them straight from Gaza, all over the world, to go to your Gaza education centers to tell you what's happening in Gaza, what's the truth about Gaza, I would tell you that Jews need to confront these bastards. I'm proud to have been arrested at Syracuse University in upstate New York, where they told us Zionists aren't allowed here. I refused to leave. There were 200 Palestinians, a few hundred Palestinians my age, who were also clearly not students. And they arrested me for refusing to leave the area. One of the things we constantly say, and I'll say to you, you're an American. Jews all over the world rightly admire Dr. Martin Luther King. Okay, Dr. Martin Luther King was first of all, was a friend of Zionists, but for many, when we talk about civil rights, was a stalwart for fighting against bigotry and hate. One of the things Martin Luther King was, of course, most well known for is for civil disobedience. Okay, is for standing up and getting arrested to make a social change.
Yeah.
Yeah. How many American or European Jewish leaders have been arrested now for protesting against this fallacy of the terrible things happening? And this isn't a right-wing or a left-wing issue, which so many people seem to conflate and seem to confuse. What I fail to understand, and they call Betar in the United States, for example, radical extremists. What is radical and extreme against standing up against Hamas USA? What is right-wing about standing up against Hamas USA? The other thing that I wrote today in our Sheva about, something that really disgusts me, is British Jewish leaders are coming to Israel to tell Gideon Sa'ar that the NGO bill that the government is trying to pass this week is illegitimate, is undemocratic. Excuse me, do the Jews in Britain not have enough problems with their nonprofits that you're coming also to lecture Israel about their nonprofits? The reality is, about those people who wrote the letter, they for years and years have ranted about racist extremist Netanyahu, and half of them are donors to the New Israel Fund, which boycotts the Jewish state. So the reality is, for us at Betar, because I want to focus on us and what we do, is we are about Zionist education. We are about Zionist empowerment. One of the things I'm proudest of that we do, frankly, in some of these broken places, is we encourage people to go out and paint over graffiti, okay? If you find graffiti near your house, and it's all over, it is all over the world, Free Palestine, the only good Zionists are the dead Zionists.
Oh, you're saying the nice ones. Okay.
I'm saying that's right. I'm saying the nice ones to
what was it, 6MNA or something like that? 6 million was not enough. That's the new acronym going around. Something like that.
So we started a very simple, concept. If you see something, do something. Okay. If that paint is on your wall and you call the police, it might take 3, 4, 5 days, 7 days until they take it down. Go and do it yourself. Betar is the only organization. We have active graffiti teams today in 15 different cities throughout the world, where our teams of people go out at night, in the daytime, and they go and paint over graffiti, which is in every city in the world these days. The amount of vandalism that these Free Palestine people have done throughout the world is simply, I'm sure, billions and billions and billions of dollars. So we do simple things like that as well, which is going out with graffiti teams, which is tremendously important. One of the most famous things, of course, there's many, many famous things about Betar. And, in your introduction, you said, for those of you who haven't heard about Jabotinsky or Betar, I would say to every listener, Jabotinsky and Betar, to be clear, is Zionism 101. Okay?
Yeah.
Zionism 101 is about Jabotinsky and Betar. I would argue, too, perhaps he was the most influential Zionist ever. Of course, many will speak about today, modern day Zionism, Theodor Herzl, of course. But Jabotinsky was the first one to speak about the need for a fighting force. There are not many independent states that don't have an independent army. Jabotinsky was the first founder of a modern day Jewish fighting force, of course, the Jewish Legion. So one of the things I'm very proud that we do is we took the name of Plugata Kotel. So Plugata Kotel was Beitarim in 1936 to 1938, who guarded Hasidic Jews who walked to the Kotel from the old city of Jerusalem, and they were unsafe walking during that time of, Palestine. Arab Palestine, British Palestine. Of course, there were Arabs and Brits and others who would prevent Jews from getting to the wall. Plugat HaKotel helped them during that period. Today, we have reformed Plugat HaKotel in many cities throughout the world. They are attacking synagogues, period. Start of
Mm,
sentence, end of sentence. Synagogues are being attacked. You're going to count on the police to protect it. We call upon Jews, and we actively do it. We go out and we help to protect those synagogues. We go out and we go out and we protect synagogues, and we do all that we can to ensure that Jews are safe in shuls. But these are terrifying times that aren't normal. And what's
mm.
happened is what happened is we've come to normalize it. So you might think it's normal to walk in the streets of London and to see keffiyehs and Palestinian flags everywhere. Those symbolize they want us dead. So of course we keep going back to the Holocaust.
The cry
And I would also tell you,
the cry of free Gaza, or whatever they call free Palestine, that's now a call to kill Jews. I remember when there was a question, is from the river to the sea genocidal? Of course it's genocidal. Now free Palestine, genocidal. And I can guarantee it'll be denied.
well, I would tell you both of those terms. So from the river to the sea is not anti-Semitic according to Meta Instagram.
Right,
Okay. Which
right.
means you can post it on Instagram and it's not racist. Free Palestine is not anti-Semitic according to the mayor of New York City, who spoke about this 4, 5, 6 days ago. And he's not unique, and nor is Meta unique. So I would also tell you that the Holocaust isn't unique in Jewish history. The Holocaust is unique in the sense that 6 million Jews were killed by Nazis in ovens, by shooting, by this, by that. But the concept of crusades and pogroms and all of these things are consistent with Jewish history. And so when we say, another Holocaust is coming, I don't say never again anymore. I remember one of my first calls, October 7th in the morning, was to, I was in the States, was to a very close family member in Rehovot who went through the Holocaust with my grandmother. And I called him and I said, yeah, beseder, everything's going to be okay. I remember he says to me, well, let's hope it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Let's hope it's going to be okay. And so I think it'll be okay for the Jews. It'll be okay for the state of Israel, but at what price?
Mm.
And I think the price has just begun. I think that, our enemy, and I say our enemy meaning Qatar, I say our enemy meaning Muslim Brotherhood, I see our enemy meaning Hamas. Our enemy is very well organized in the world, is intent on a different outcome than we are. Those who, of course, don't value life, they look at time much differently. They look at, many, many, many things much differently. I think we're in deep, deep, deep danger. And as again, I'm coming back, shortly, thank God, to Israel. In Israel as well, we have deep trouble.
Yeah.
So you look at kind of, what the Jewish world looks like. I think Israel will be fine. I think ultimately diaspora Jewry will be fine, but I think there's a lot of cities that have fallen and will not recover. If it's a month from now, if it's 10 years from now, time will tell. But we are in deep trouble.
I have to play the devil's advocate and disagree with you. I don't think the diaspora is going to be fine. You're doing something that I wholeheartedly support, which is you talk about Zionism. I think you define Zionism differently than many people. Jews return to Israel, but the problem is being a Jew in exile has no correlation to being a Jew in America in the exile. Jews and it's amazing that the most anti-Semitism is on the Ivy League campuses where there's supposed to be a high level of culture and where Jews were grossly overrepresented. I think I kind of get a kick out of it when people say that the IDF is brutal. I'm like, yes, remember that. We're brutal. We are the offspring of King David. You mess with us, you're going to mess with a professional army that can just take care of business. I hear the Jews in America, they say they're Zionist, but they're still in the exile. They talk like, oh, they're doing this, so we should call the police. Oh, they're doing this, we should sue them. We should legislate. I'm like, no, you should say that you favored hobby is playing baseball, and you should walk around with a baseball hat, a baseball mitt, and a baseball bat. That's what you should do. I think that we have to take the exile out of the Jews. We have to we have to make them um, Jews. We have to make them Yehuda. We have to make them the offspring of King David, the offspring of King Saul, the offspring of Abraham, who did not hesitate to take on five armies. I, I I hate to say this. I listen to American Jews. God bless them. They're finally waking up a little bit, but they're whiny. They need to really get down to business, and that's Zionism.
The
That's
story
Zionism.
of this Kishinev, okay, the pogrom in Kishinev completely changed Zev Jabotinsky's outlook
Oh,
on Kishinev completely changed Jabotinsky's outlook, perhaps on life, some say. He was writing at the time, and he was in Kishinev. And when he wrote about it afterwards, he said that inspired him not to create a new Jew, not to create a new fighting Jew, but to create the old Jew, to create the Jew from the time of the Maccabees, to create the Jew from the time of King David, to create the Jew that you speak of, that is a battler, that is a warrior. And of course, we've lived in exile for so many years. And the purpose of Jabotinsky, the purpose of Betar, is to help bring Jews back to normalcy. The
yeah.
purpose of Betar and the purpose of what we do in Jabotinsky's name is to bring Jews back to a proper state of sitting upright, a proper state of understanding and remembering what it is to be a Jew. And I think that we are living, I believe, frankly, in messianic times. So when I say that, the diaspora will be okay, I think in my lifetime, there will still be Jews living in certain places in the diaspora where they will be okay. Okay. And we can speak about that. Ultimately, however, of course, the Jewish future is only in Israel. Ultimately, for every single reason, the Jewish halachically, spiritually, normalcy, everything you can speak of, the Jewish future is in the Jewish state, is in the state of Israel with all the problems that we have. I agree with you. Jews are in the diaspora whiny and kvetchy and
Yes.
unorganized, and they have an inability to fight. You speak about baseball bats. Funny, we use in our ads the Bear Jew. So the Bear Jew
Oh
was from
yeah,
Inglorious Bastards, and we use it. By the way, it's great. The Anti-Defamation League. We are the only Jewish extremist hate group in the ADL's database of extremist radical groups. Why are we there? Among other reasons, is because we encourage Jews to bring baseball bats to protests. If somebody is coming to protest at your synagogue, at a synagogue, it is mind-boggling, perhaps.
there
But if
the
you
age.
sit back and you look at Jewish history, it's not mind-boggling. It's not mind-boggling to you sitting in Israel that terrorists could attack you in 12 seconds wherever you are. That's not mind-boggling, right? We understand that. We accept that. Diaspora Jews still say, oh my goodness, 2 people were shot in Washington, D.C. By the way, it's a week later. Nobody besides their parents already remembers their name. Already, it has become an accepted thing that and they weren't just shot in Washington, D.C. They were hunted down in Washington,
Yeah,
D.C. Not just
yeah.
were they hunted down and shot, but a young man handed the guy back his keffiyeh after he shot him. Look at the video. An
Was that it?
American Jew.
Was that it? Did he go into the museum and they were Jews?
He went into the event. He shot them. The woman was on the floor crawling, and he shot her again and again. Okay, so it
Reloaded.
was an execution. It
He
wasn't just a
reloaded.
shooting, Hamas style execution like we saw in Be'eri or near Oz or wherever else. Okay, number one. Number two, he threw his gun into the bushes. He walked inside. These nice Nebuchadnezzar Jews gave him some water, blah, 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 blah.
They
A few
were
minutes.
Jews. They were
Of course,
Jews who.
he walked into the event. He walked into that event, which was held by the esteemed American Jewish Committee, that they were also speaking about among the agendas on the agenda for that night was how to get more food and aid into Gaza. That was among the agenda items that night. Anyway, he walks into that event. Eventually, after a few minutes sitting down, he starts screaming, "Free Palestine." He walks out. 2 police, non-Jewish police officers grab him. A Jewish kid there, Yoni Kalish, hands the guy back his keffiyeh. Can you imagine? The terrorist is struggling with security guards, and the Jewish kid sees the guy with the keffiyeh, hands it back. Well, I didn't know he was a terrorist. The proper thing to do with a keffiyeh is not to hand it back to a terrorist. The proper thing to do with a Palestinian flag is not to hand it back to a terrorist. And sadly, within the diaspora Jewish world, we are speaking in many ways into a vacuum. There is such a dichotomy between what Israel believes and thinks and what America and Europe and Australia and other Jews around the world seem to think. And of course, it's a fear factor. And of course, it's a desire to fit in. And of course, it's, and I don't believe for one second it's about Prime Minister Netanyahu. We
Yeah.
believe we believe firmly as a world Jewish organization that the state of Israel, the people of Israel, have the right to elect who they choose to elect. All of these Jewish groups who boycott our national security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, and our finance minister, Mr. Smotrich, are wrong to boycott them. The people of Netivot, the people of Ashdod, the people of Ariel, the people of Ma'ale Adumim also have a vote. They have the right to elect who they want to. Who is the American Jewish Committee? Who is the Conference of Presidents of major American Jewish organizations to dare to boycott the elected officials of the state of Israel? And at Betar, I'm also very proud. We host these leaders all over the world. And I say it to anybody in the Israeli government who might hear this or at any time, Betar will gladly host any elected official of the state of Israel warmly, because we won't allow them in the diaspora to define and to decide for the state of Israel who we can choose and who we can elect. It's absurd.
I was wondering the other day, I was thinking, why are they so against Netanyahu? He's the longest serving Israeli prime minister in history. Why all of a sudden do they hate him? And I realized it's because he actually stood up and said, "Oh no, we have to get rid of all these entities, all these countries and organizations that want to murder us. We got to get rid of them." And people are like, "Oh no, that's too right wing, that's too extremist." It doesn't make sense. And you mentioned the ADL being against you. The ADL is being run by Greenblatt, who was an Obama advisor, and their primary function, the reason why they came into existence was precisely to stop all the anti-Semitism that is. He has failed miserably at his job, and he has the gall to dictate to Israel what we should be doing, and AIPAC and the World Zionist Congress. They think that the two-state solution is a solution. The two-state solution is the final solution. It's precisely an echo of the Nuremberg laws, where you put Jews into a smaller and smaller place, and then you can liquidate them. It's just the Jews in America have been failed not only by the government and the police, they're being failed by their own organizations, and they really need to take it into their own hands.
We encourage Jews to do exactly that. These legacy Jewish organizations, they brought us here. It's amazing. Exactly right. All of these Jewish organizations, many of them, rant and rave about how awful Netanyahu is. Well, what responsibility do you have for what has happened to diaspora Jewry? A. B. Prime Minister Netanyahu, let's look at, thank God, where the Jewish state is, all in all. You combine everything. Let's look at where the Jewish state is, how many years after we were formed. And yes, Prime Minister Netanyahu deserves a lot of credit and a lot of thanks. And as well, those who choose to oppose him inside the state of Israel. We have elections. People should choose who they want to. But one of the things I always say to these, great American Jews, these brilliant American, how about if Ben-Gvir wins 22 seats next time? Then what's going to happen? How about if Smotrich or again, you're also not going to get I'm not sure of the great policy differences that will exist today between Prime Minister Netanyahu and whoever else there is. I'm not sure there's such policy differences in terms of, how we approach. And I heard your, introduction on Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I'm fond of saying I'm a Beitari. I'm not necessarily a Likudnik. Jabotinsky ideology and oftentimes the ideology today of whatever the Likud party looks like aren't necessarily the same. There are certainly many voices in Israel that aren't heard in the mainstream media that would say this right-wing leader has taken so long to clean up this small place called Gaza. There are certainly many, people who would ask, Why has this war taken so long? What would people be saying what would the right be saying if the left was in power so much longer, the Houthis were still firing weapons? What would the right be saying if what was happening now with constant terror attacks in the state of Israel, and you have a friendly administration? There's a lot that Netanyahu can do that, again, President Trump and Betar is one of the very few Jewish organizations in the world, along with ZOA. I think we're the only two that I know of in the world that support both President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Okay? The majority of Jewish organizations in the world do not support the democratically elected President of the United States and the democratically elected, Prime Minister of the State of Israel. And so we firmly believe that President Trump's peace plan for Gaza is a very viable, very strong plan.
It's brilliant.
That should be looked at. One speaks of the terrible conditions for the poor people in Gaza. It's inhabitable. Well, as President Trump rightfully said, you need to look at other places to live for humanitarian purposes. This is what the President of the United States said. Not radical, not extreme, not Rabbi Kahana. This is the President of the United States. And so one can surely understand.
People forget that Gaza had what they called Gush Katif, which were the Jewish settlements in 2005, and it was the settlements there were actually, they had hotels. It's on the Mediterranean. It was the best surfing in Israel. It was amazing. They exported $80,000 a day in agricultural. It has so much potential if you choose to live.
It's funny, when I grew up in Betar, we used to have a annual weekend at Gush Katif. I forget the name of the hotel there. Of the hotel there, but we used to spend the next to last Shabbaton in Gush Katif for many years.
Really,
this is in the '90s. For many years, we would go there again. I mean, we were kids hanging out. It was nice there. That's it. It was very nice. We went there. And of course, they could have made it anything that they want. Again, the Gaza beach, many say, is nicer than Tel Aviv beaches.
It is.
I am again. I'm a big fan of the city of Tel Aviv, my favorite city in the world. I am the rare, right-wing Jabotinsky in Tel Aviv. I love Tel Aviv, but I would tell you that, there are many that say that the beach, and I know the beaches of Tel Aviv very well. There are many that say the beaches of Gaza are nicer than the beaches of Tel Aviv. They did what they did. They chose what they chose. And what we and the Jews have to understand, it's not my problem what they chose and did. That's what they chose and what they did. Now, the Jewish people, and again, Betar, inside and outside of Israel, has a strong role in reminding Jews about what Jabotinsky said and also what Jabotinsky did and what the Betar movement did. All of this talking is nice. When there is an encampment, we instantly, it's funny, we often put up ads with the Inglorious Bastard, the Jew with a baseball bat. Okay, you look at that.
Oh,
come to the police tell you, avoid the area, don't come to the encampment. Our message is come to the area. Wherever wherever they are, you go. And yet, in cities throughout the world, Jews don't do it and can't do it.
I think they should. Also, I want to touch on, if you can, Betar has it's almost like an America first, very Trumpian kind of agenda. You want to deport. You have a deportation list of illegal Hamas agitators in America. It's very Trumpian. I just want to preface this by saying, I was a lifelong Democrat until I came to Israel. I'm a little bit ashamed of that. I'm still doing tshuva on that. But the Democratic Party has taken absurd positions in their rush to oppose anything Trump. And when Trump says deport illegal immigrant criminals, the Democratic Party is going against that for reasons they take a very absurd position. So you say, look, there's a guy in Hamas. They should be deported. And I just can't imagine anyone coming up and saying, oh no, you're wrong with that. So how's that working out for you, and how's that work?
So we announced that we decided before Trump became president that we would work to build lists of the worst pro-Hamas people in the United States, which we've now expanded to the world, because we are frontline at protests in so many cities, we know intelligence that very few others know. We can tell you that these are the people handing out the signs. We either tell you that these are the people doing this. We tell you that these are the people doing that. And one of the things that we did was we built lists of terrorists in America, in Europe, that need to be deported. It has been reported that we have, newspapers and others have written that we have very good access to the Trump administration. It has been reported and written that we have been very successful in getting people deported. Mahmoud Khalil, who of course is perhaps one of the most famous, terrorists to now be blamed us in his court papers and his court filings.
Not a nice guy. Not a nice guy, by the way.
He is a Fatah activist from the Shtachim. He is from the Judea and Samaria.
On the payroll. On the payroll.
And I would also say more than that. We believe, and I'll say it here, and it hasn't been reported enough. Who do you think are these 20-something-year-old Palestinians? These are the children of family members of terrorists. These are the nieces and nephews of, if you have family in Gaza, okay, and you're a 24-year-old here that's paying $75,000 for university, who's paying $75,000 from Gaza? Where's that money coming from? Who are these people? And who these people are is they are the family members of terrorists. But, again, we speak about it, we passed the tipping point. One of the biggest challenges we found is that a lot of these people are Americans. A lot of these people are born and bred Americans, the same way that somebody like you or somebody like me raises our children to teach them about the beauty of Zionism, the beauty of our wonderful religion. They are doing the same thing with their vantage point, and it's not coming back. So we are very proud to build lists of jihadis to deport. We have also built lists of what we will call capos, of Jewish traitors who we believe will not be permitted to enter the Jewish state. We have held, again, let's remember so it's clear. We are Betar. So let's take a step back and remember, we are Betar. What does that mean today in a Netanyahu-run government? The reality is it means that the majority of consul generals or ambassadors throughout the world subscribe to our worldview or are perhaps members of our organization, right? I mean, you can accept that, of course. So from the prime minister himself, whose father, of course, had the most notable, impression on him, Ben-Zion Netanyahu, was the right-hand man of Jabotinsky for many years. But
really?
Yes, he was.
I didn't know that.
Ben-Zion Netanyahu was Zev Jabotinsky's secretary throughout much of his life. They were the closest of allies. Benjamin Netanyahu did not grow up in the Betar movement, but he did grow up very much educated in the Jabotinsky realm of life. So both Prime Minister Shamir and both Prime Minister Begin and Prime Minister Shamir were both members of the Betar movement. Today, from Amir Hochana, who is the current Knesset speaker, to Ofer Akunis, who is the consul general of the state of New York for Israel, to people all over the world and inside the government. These are Beitarim. These are Jabotinsky followers. So we have built with them, and we have presented to many of them lists of people who are very dangerous throughout the world, who are Jews, who have no place visiting Israel. Somebody like Peter Beinhardt, somebody like Norman Finkelstein. These are enemies of the Jewish people today. These are enemies of the Jewish state, and they have no place entering the Jewish state. And we will do all we can that we prevent them from entering. And those who do enter will be welcomed by Beitarim if they manage to get into the state. Peter Beinhardt, Finkelstein, others, we will welcome them to the Jewish state, Beitar style. These, again, these are people, I will tell you, who in the diaspora don't say a word about what's happening to the Jewish people, but constantly and again criticize us. All of them who are big shots on the media, I say to them, where the hell were you for this rally? Where were you for that rally? There's a despicable, there are many despicable people.
The haters of Israel love them.
And the haters of Israel love them, and they don't give a damn about us. These people simply don't even come out on campus or in cities to protect the Jews. What is right wing about going out and standing up against free Palestine?
There you go.
What makes it right wing? Somehow it's managed to become a right wing issue. I would ask Habonim Dror. I would ask everybody out there, why are you not standing against these people? These are enemies of civilization. And so you speak about, Trumpian beliefs. One of the things that Betar foremost believes throughout the world. It's now noon in. It's now almost noon in New York, and we have a rally now kicking off at this moment in London at King's College, and the guys there will hold big British flags, big Israeli flags, big Betar flags, but also big British flags, because this battle that we fight, whether it's in Britain, in Australia, or in America, this enemy that we faced on October 7th is the same enemy that wants to destroy civilization. And ultimately, speak about, will Jews be safe in the diaspora? I believe in many senses, this is a war on civilization. This is a
It
war
is.
we're facing, right? And so where does that war end and where does that war begin? Even when people talk about a ceasefire, which ceasefire from whom, from where? And so it's very important, I think, as well, that, and it irks me tremendously that these American Jewish groups, these diaspora Jewish groups, don't support their local right-wing government, their local conservative governments. It's insane.
I think
But
I
this is
think
the way of the Jewish people.
I think for too long, not only the Jewish leaders and people have been asleep at the wheel, but far too many people have been asleep at the wheel. They don't understand that the pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel thing is against all of society and or normal society, and they've had a lot of free time to just do their thing. When we started suffering the waves of knife stabbings and stuff like that before the war, we called it the Oslo Intifada because this was the Oslo generation. These were the Palestinian children that grew up after Oslo. And Oslo, rather than placate and give them hope for life, said, "Oh, you know, murdering Jews can be a good job." We the UN, it was the whole UNRWA was designed specifically to make the conflict continue. Normally, a refugee leaves after a generation. If he goes somewhere else, he's got a new nationality. But they wanted to perpetuate it, so they gave the perpetual ad infinitum refugee status. And when we see the products, the young people, they're so brainwashed. They talk about Palestine, which doesn't exist, and they support. You know, you have to remember you can't support Hamas. It's illegal. It's classified by the U.S. government.
Says who? Says who it's illegal.
It's classified by the U.S. government as a terrorist organization.
But it
You
doesn't
can't.
matter if the law, but if a law isn't enforced, it doesn't matter. Go
That's
and
it.
tell them. Go and tell half the universities in the world that Hamas is illegal. King's College London hosted a seminar just a few weeks ago on understanding Hamas, on how they are no longer a terrorist group, by an author. Because she's an author, she can speak about it. And you have people in every city in the world openly praising Hamas, as you know, and
Right.
that's why even with this president hopefully being better and hopefully being good, these are very dark times in the world. And
These
you talk
are
about deportations. Betar firmly believes that many nations have a choice. You'll get jihadis or you'll get Jews. That's really your choice ultimately, because a place like London, which is probably past the tipping point, they don't deport. How can they survive? How can the nation stay as it is?
right. What you're doing with the deportations is so important because it's a cancer that's metastasized. It's been given time to really dig itself into the kishkas of the entire culture, and it's going to be 1,000 times more difficult to dig it out. You have these young people; they're in the most prestigious universities. They've been brainwashed thoroughly if they're not already coming from there. You have people in Congress people, um, unable to condemn murder in the streets. It's
I don't think it's unable. I don't think it's unable. It's not unable to condemn. It is unwilling. And why are they unwilling?
of
Why
course.
are they unwilling? Say it, because they support it. So you have members of Congress, many, who openly support Hamas.
Well,
They don't openly because they can't, but they are pro Hamas, period. They are pro Hamas. from the New York City Council to the mayor of London to many others. These are people that are simply anti-Zionist. Okay, they're pro-Fatah, they're not pro-Hamas. Give me a break. It's semantics. It's bullshit, and it's and it's. I don't believe that it's people talk about brainwashing. If they're brainwashed or not, I don't care. It's not our issue. It's not our problem. We have to face the reality is that that's what they are. That's what they believe, and what do we do about it?
To be honest, if someone had approached me with your agenda, with your plans, with your ideas 20 years ago, I would have said, "Oh, that's extremist. That's extremist." But you know something? We are in an extreme condition, and it calls for extreme action. Extreme. If you're incredibly ill, you don't take aspirin. If you're incredibly ill, you need an extreme a response. And I think your response, if anything, is a little bit muted. We're really in deep trouble here. We've got
Our
to.
response, again, you're correct. Some people call us extremists. I want to be clear. Our offices are in the Likud building on King George Street in the center of Tel Aviv. We are very mainstream for Zionism. What we are extreme for is for diaspora Jews that think that, as you said at the beginning of this, I can't tell you every day they tell us about they're going to sue, they're going to sue, they're going to sue. Columbia University has more money than you do. Columbia University, Harvard, these places have billions and nothing's happened. They're going to sue you. Call the police. The police don't help you. The courts don't help you. Then what? And this, by the way, is very much the essence of Zionism. This is very much the essence of how the Jewish state started. You talk about, I'm a proud Beitari. You talk about, groups like the Irgun. The Irgun was 3,000 people. And everything. They were 3,000 people. Great mass movements, okay? Whether it was, the JDL or the Triple SJ, they're probably, if you're an American Jew from, made Aliyah 91, you probably knew a little bit about the, student struggle for Soviet Jewry or the
I
JDL or
remember.
movements
Sure,
like
sure,
this.
sure,
And
sure.
these were not, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. These were Jews and Zionists that were standing up and saying enough is enough. And the reality is, I think that I don't want to sugarcoat things. We're in deep trouble. I would tell you that, having worked on Betar now very hard for the last 14 months, it's much worse than we thought. It's
It
much
is.
worse than we thought because people are calling us. We get calls with the most awful stories, awful stories. I want to talk here about, I regret not saying it earlier, a young man named Aviv Brock, okay, who your Israeli listeners don't know and your American listeners don't know. He was a 23-year-old young boy from Petah Tikva who went to live in Memphis, Tennessee for a year to be a locksmith, him and his buddy. This is in January 2025. He was murdered in Memphis, Tennessee for what the family believes was a hate crime. Memphis police haven't investigated it as a hate crime. The only thing stolen was his Israeli passport, and nobody knows the name. It is
I've
beyond the pale.
I've never heard of
Whoops.
it. I've
You've
never
never
heard of
heard
it.
of it? And because it was in the Israeli papers for 10 seconds. It was in the American papers for 10 seconds. Google it. Everybody, please Google it. All of you. The family would love it. Israeli locksmith murdered in Memphis. Google it and read about it. And the family would love to speak about it further. But it's a terrible, terrible situation. And there's so many of them. How many of us know the name? There was a man who was murdered in Los Angeles in December 2023. He was struck by a Palestinian with a pole to his
Oh,
head, to the back.
that I did
It looks,
remember. Old
I
guy.
remember.
Old guy. You
Old
don't.
guy. I think he was 77 or something.
Yeah.
He went out, and he was murdered by a Palestinian. How many people know his name? There's a terrible story. Actually, you guys are covering it, Israel 365. Terrible story of Moshe Glick. Moshe Glick is a Jew from New Jersey who was hosting recently a seminar on real estate in Israel. Hamas, New Jersey, attacked the shul, attacked the guy. Moshe protected the Jew, who was a 64-year-old Jew, who was being beaten up by a 38-year-old Palestinian. Moshe was charged with weapons or this or that because he removed them. He protected the Jew. He's being charged. Israel 365, seen on your site yesterday, the other day, had been helping Moshe Glick to raise money for lawyers. It is a terrible situation for Jews throughout the world, and it's terrible for many, many, many reasons. And I'm not sure how it gets much better. Betar is here to fight. Betar will stand up. We're doing the best we can. It's hard, it's hard to raise money. It's hard to do this. It's difficult.
I think the hardest part of your job is convincing Jews to take the exile out of them and to start being the descendants of King David. To start, I had this very dear friend in Israel, sweet Israeli guy, soft spoken, and then one time he's a sniper in the paratroopers. And one time he showed me a video of his unit doing exercises. I mean, these guys are killers. And I'm like, that's it. These are Jewish soldiers. They're not the big, burly, angry guys. And it's very rare you see any decals that have like death on them or something. This is a Jewish army, and Jews should be fighters. We are fighters.
And it's something diaspora Jews have to remember and recall,
Amen. Amen.
and fighters in their spirit, and fighters in their attitude, and fighters in their thinking, and all of these things, and it's dark days are ahead.
Unfortunately. Ron, I really can't thank you enough. I don't want to keep you for too long, and I have kept you for too long. I could talk with you forever. If you come to Israel, either come to the Golan. I'll be happy to have lunch with you. I'll serve you lunch and make you coffee. I enjoyed this so much that if you come to Israel, I'll even come to Tel Aviv to see him. And that's something I don't say.
I'm back home in a few weeks, and I'd love to get together with you and chat. And one of the things I always say, and again, I spend half my time in Israel, is I generally don't leave Tel Aviv. It's exactly like you
don't
say,
go to Tel Aviv. I ride through on the train.
Exactly, I've always been a city. I've always been a city person, and in Tel Aviv, it's. I go to Jerusalem every few weeks, but I work and I stay in Tel Aviv. But it's. I'm happy to come and see you, and happy to spend time, and look forward to getting to know you. And thank you so much. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you so much, Ron. This was amazing. God willing, we changed a few minds here. You be blessed.
Thank you both
this has been Ron.